to be here at the dissemination of the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility and Fiscal Rule for the management of Uganda's oil resources. It has been a pleasure to share with a very competent staff of the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development of Uganda our experience in managing the oil sector and the oil revenues during our 51 years oil era. Our close cooperation on the management of oil revenues, our close cooperations with Uganda started early 2018, and we have met on many occasions here in Uganda and in Norway during these 5 years. For many countries, resource wealth seems to have been a curse rather than a blessing. We have in Norway ourselves done our mistakes, but we have learned from them. And I think the people of Norway have benefited greatly from the petroleum revenues. Oil revenues have contributed to making lives better for Norwegians, which was the vision 50 years ago. And I also think, not least, that we have been able to combine a strong oil sector with strong developments also in the non-oil parts of the economy. And that may be the biggest challenge in general. Revenues from oil differ from other revenues. They are not income in its traditional sense, but stem from depletion of a non-renewable natural resource. The resource belongs to the people, including future generations. And the temporary and also highly volatile proceeds from oil necessitate a decoupling of spending from current accrual. One needs a mechanism to shelter the economy from instability from overspending of oil revenues. These two aspects are reflected in the fiscal rules of our two countries. But the fiscal rule of Uganda differs from ours in some respects, for good reasons. One is that the relative share of petroleum in our economy is significantly higher than in Uganda. Secondly, our income level is higher. And thirdly, we will in Norway see a rapid aging of our population in the decades to come, while Uganda has a much younger population and a much more rapid population growth. I think Uganda has found a good balance in the fiscal rule. Firstly, a net debt ceiling of 50% of GDP to keep the debt on a sustainable level. Secondly, a limit of 3% deficit of GDP on the non-oil primary balance to de-link expenditure from volatile oil revenues and to ensure that the debt ceiling is lowered and kept below the ceiling. And thirdly, setting an upper limit of 0.8% of GDP on how much to be spent annually of the oil revenues, while transferring the amount above this limit to the Petroleum Revenue Investment Reserve, saving it for the future. And an escape clause in event of a natural disaster, an unanticipated severe economic shock, or any other significant unforeseen event. It is a rather simple rule, as it should be. This contributes to transparency and makes the rule easy to communicate, which should be, I think, a prerequisite for a good rule. But, of course, even with a good rule, it's not always easy to live up to it. That is the experience of many countries. And I know Uganda is facing many challenges. Economic effects of drought, the COVID-19 pandemic, global impacts of the war in Ukraine. And I suppose there will be many tough decisions to be taken in your budget policies over the next year. But I wish you all the best in your economic policies to make lives better for Ugandans and combat poverty. And I sincerely hope, and I do believe, that your fiscal rule and more generally the Charter will serve you well. Once again, I thank the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development for the excellent cooperation during these 5 years.